Hi, I'm Sam,
And I'm Andrew.
and this is Teens Talk Politics. On today's episode, we're doing a 4th of July special, and we're going to be kind of covering over some of the history and political history of the 4th of July. So this might be a bit of a shorter episode, but I think will suffice. So, so in our first segment today, we're going to be covering the difference between July 2nd and July 4th. There's been a lot of confusion with people arguing over which is actually Independence Day. Federally, it's considered July 4th, but July 2nd is technically the founding day. What happened was this is a brief history. The Continental Congress of 1776 approved the split from the United Kingdom, and on July 2nd, and 2 days later on July 4th they announced it. We don't know what they did on July 3rd. They were like, let's take a break. We just created a new nation. But it was announced and kind of declared and associated with the press on the 4th.
Yeah. So yes. So they signed it. Sorry, they signed it on the 4th. However, it was approved by Congress on the 2nd. So yes, you could say yes, it could be July 2nd. But like Sam said, it's shown by the federal government to be the 4th, and that's why we celebrate it on the 4th of July, not the 2nd of July. And I think it's important to understand that both of these dates, both July 2nd and July 4th, are very important because they were when we broke away from Great Britain. Mm-hmm. However, one doesn't go without the other, right? If July 2nd didn't happen, the Congress didn't approve it, no one would sign it on the 4th, right? If no one signed it on the 4th, well, it doesn't make sense because the 2nd wouldn't have happened yet. But yes,
yeah, but if no one declared it on the 4th, nobody would know about it.
Yeah, and it's just very important to understand that no, there's just not this one date that it all happened. It wasn't necessarily over these two dates either. It wasn't just July 2nd and July 4th. But two big major events happened on these 2 days that led us as a country of the United States to break away from Great Britain and become our own independent nation. So to say that July 4th is the one that we should celebrate, I feel like July 2nd is just as important as July 4th. However, as much as it matters, it doesn't really matter to us very much right now because
it's final. Nobody celebrates the 2nd.
Culturally, we've grown up believing, yes, July 4th is when you celebrate, and that's not going to change. And it doesn't really matter if it changes because it doesn't really affect us very much. Yes, it happened, I don't know how many years, 1776 is, that's 300 years, something like that. Not that long ago. It was something like that, okay? Years ago. And yes, it's important, but it's not going to affect us very much, so where people actually take action to understand that we celebrate the 2 days. I think it's perfectly fine to just celebrate on the 4th, but it's important to understand that yes, both of these dates are very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want any nerds arguing in the comment section. I see you. For our next segment, we have a pretty controversial, yet important segment. We're going to be discussing the politics in 1776 versus the politics in 2021. I think to basically put it simply and to start all this discussion off, it was a lot. I think it probably was a lot more cross-politan there, as the United States was currently kind of trying to defeat a common enemy. There was very few parties, and the parties that did exist in the Continental Congress were kind of ineffectual, and because everybody was either a Federalist or independent, I think.
Yeah, and that's a good point because being an independent means you're basically going to join bipartisanly, which, of course, Bernie Sanders is technically an independent. However, he's not bipartisan whatsoever. back in 1776, our first president was considered an independent. He didn't run on a party. George Washington was unopposed. However, there were people running for the vice presidency, but him himself did not have a party. Therefore, he could work with both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And I think it was very important for the first president to be someone that both of the future parties, Republican, Democrats, can look up and say that was a very good president, and he was bipartisan. Of course, nowadays there are presidents like Franklin Roosevelt. He was a Democrat. Both parties are like, he was a good president. Abraham Lincoln, a Republican. Both parties say this is a good president. But I think it was very important for us to have a foundation back in 1776 to have our first president. I think he was elected in 1778, I think George Washington was, so I don't think 1776 was when he was actually elected. However, back then, the 1700s, it was important for us to, like I said, have a foundation of a president that was bipartisan and worked with both parties. Like I said, it was the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and could get legislation out. And I will say, compared to 1776 and 2001, it was much more important to them back in 1776 for other countries around the world and empires that still happened in Asia, Africa, Europe, that America was an actual country, an independent nation, that we could rise up to threats if there was threats from another country, and that we were going to be a strong, powerful nation that not another nation would oppose. And I think that was a big thing that the politicians back in the day were trying to focus on. Nowadays, yes, America is known as being a powerful nation. We are obviously known as being an actual independent nation, which wasn't as clear back in 1776 because, of course, the news wasn't as widespread as it is now. You don't have 24-hour networks going on back in 1776. Now you do. And yes, it's important to the politicians now to have America be a great standing in the world. But it's not as important now. Yes, Trump went to NATO, and he bashed a bunch of other world leaders, not making America look bad. But that wasn't our main priority. 1776, something like that happened, and a world leader, like let's say George Washington, there was no NATO in 1776, but let's say there's a NATO summit, a G7 summit, sorry, and he bashed all the other world leaders. It would make America look bad. And since that's a big priority back then, George Washington would look really, really bad and possibly not have gotten reelected in 4 years. And I think what the politicians back then were prioritizing are very different. Nowadays, they're prioritizing, okay, what party can stay in power? Yes, that was a thought back in the day, but it wasn't as front in their minds of, yes, we want the Federalists to stay in power, or no, or we want the Anti-Federalists to be in power. Now, it's all about that. It's all about, can Democrats stay in control? Can Republicans get the control or stay in control? And I think these things have really changed over the years. If you go back only like 100 years, it was very similar to this. People were working together. There were bipartisan people in Congress, where Democrats would work with Republicans and Republicans would work with Democrats. It was very similar to that back into the 1700s. That doesn't happen anymore. The politics compared to now and then are very different, and I think it's really because of how polarized we are as a nation, which we were afraid of threats back into 1776, but we're not really worried about these outside threats anymore. Yes, we have North Korea, yes, we have China, yes, we have Russia, these adversaries, but do you actually think they're just going to outright attack us? Yes, Russia's done cyber attacks, but a military attack on us won't happen because they know we are a strong nation and we shouldn't be afraid of that. What people are afraid of now are, will this person be in power in my country? Will Trump win in 2024? Will Biden win in 2024? Will Democrats keep controlling Congress in 2022? It's all about that now. Because, like I said, our nation is so much polarized. So much more polarized than we were back in 1776 as a nation and politically.
Yeah, I think to sum up your argument, I think instead of the United States rallying together to fight against a common enemy, since we've made such good progress, and since there's no real threats to America unbound and no real threats to the peace, that I think what happens is the United States tries to instead of pushing forward in one direction I think parties try to push in different directions to get what they want for the homeland involved. Um, so I think to sum up your thing, instead of having cross partisan politics in order to progressively work to become more of a global power, since we've reached that, we can now parties are fighting over policies on how to govern themselves and the rest of the world once we've reached major global power status.
Yeah, and
All right.
I think we're about to move on to our next point, and it really ties into our last point between the politics of 1776 and 2001. Not 2001. 2021. I think I might have said 2001 earlier, but yes, 2021, sorry. And the reason it ties into this so nicely is because it's these politicians that are like, okay, you need to support my bill because our founding fathers would. Right?
Yeah.
This is some random example. I don't know if this actually happened, but let's say the anti-lynching bill, okay? Rand Paul is like, okay, let's amend this bill. However, Cory Booker would be like, okay, our founding fathers wouldn't want you to do this. And they're using this as an example of, go back to what our original founding fathers wanted. And what would they want? And I think the real problem with this is that they were good for their time. I don't think they would be a good leader nowadays. And this might be very controversial to say, but the reason I say this is, yes, they owned slaves. Yes, they were racist. They wouldn't stand up to our expectations that we have in today's society. In today's society,
Yeah.
we need someone that's open, someone that can support other groups of people that aren't just white or whatever ethnic race they're part of. And I think our founding fathers just weren't that. They couldn't support another race, right? Yes, they supported only white men being able to vote. Women were not able to vote back then. Black people were not able to vote back then because like I said, they only supported certain races, and black people were mostly slaves, so they couldn't vote because you needed to own land. And the only reason a black man or black woman would be brought to America is to be a slave, so they wouldn't own any land, so they wouldn't be able to vote. And just this wasn't, there was nothing in this piece of legislation to keep them from voting by specifically pointing out people of another race, like a black man. But, of course, it's going to be aimed at them because the only people that own land are going to be white people. Right? And that's why I say this, is because our founding fathers wouldn't support a lot of things that we have today because their ideologies are very different to what we have now. The Civil Rights Act, they probably wouldn't have supported that. They owned slaves that were primarily black. Vast majority of them were black. Almost all of them were. And to say that we need to say, if our founding fathers supported this is what we need to do. Yes, they did a lot of good. But in today's society, they weren't as wise as we might think they were, right? Because of things they supported might not be acceptable for our society.
Yeah. Yeah, like, to summarize it up, it's like the times change and the necessary leaders for so do so. And if the leaders aren't able to change, then you can't make a good argument for them as a past example of good politics for the future and the present. And that's and as we do that, let's move on to our next segment, July 4th traditions. It's pretty simple. We all know that America has developed these traditions along July 4th, especially the famed fireworks and famed fireworks, the famed American style food, barbecue. But it's also militaristic impact. There's the impact that it's had on the military has been extensive. So it kind of rallies the military together. Not saying it's like propaganda for the military, but it's a very patriotic. It's a kind of a very patriotic symbol and calling to see all this patriotism and glory shown in this holiday, about how the pride and abilities of these American citizens.
Yeah, and back to your point about the military, quote, propaganda, end quote, right? And I think this is important for America to have, is because especially during the Trump administration, whether or not you agree that Trump represented us on the world stage correctly, I don't believe he did, but for those that don't believe he did, trashed us on the world stage, this shows us these marches that the military is happening. The military is happening. There's a parade in Denmark that's happening. There's one in the Philippines, and all across America with fireworks and, like I said, parades and parties. And it really and it will show other countries that America is still here, and America is still standing in the world. So don't dare threaten us, right? With cybersecurity alarms, like in Russia, and other things like that. And I think if we didn't have this holiday where we had the military come out and march as a celebration, I don't think countries would think that we are weak, but also this confirms it to other countries that, yes, we have a strong military, don't dare attack us. And it shows that we are powerful, regardless of what we are on the world stage, regardless of who our world leader is, we still have power that can strike back at whoever dares attack us.
Yeah. And that kind of wraps us onto our last point. The impact culturally that that the United States July 4th has on the rest of the world is very extensive. I mean, it develops stereotypical, but also, as we were saying, kind of militaristic. I think the American pride is extensive, and I think it kind of shows what the Americans are willing to do. It shows stereotypically that the Americans sometimes are over the top, and among other things. But it really kind of it's a very good symbol to the rest of the world, because in cultural you can, like, by firework by Katy Perry, like you can do, like, light it up like a firework, like it's all about that July 4th stuff right there. And it's just culturally, it's a big deal, not for the United States, but for the rest of the world.
Well, you said that a lot of people outside in other countries think that America is over the top. And I think sometimes we need to, because we are the only superpower left. It used to be us and the USSR, and of course, they're not around anymore. So we're the only superpower left.
Yeah, it used to be Great Britain and France. Now, what is it? Yeah.
So we're the only superpower, and we want to stay a superpower in the world. So we kind of need these over-top military celebrations, July 4th, fireworks, to show, like I said, other countries that we are still here. We are still a superpower. We have a strong military, and we're gonna stay. We're gonna stay and have a strong military. We're gonna stay a superpower, and don't defy us, basically. And I think it's important for us to have these over-top military celebrations, fireworks and everything, for that exact reason.
Yeah.
So I think this basically wraps up it. And if there's anything Sam wants to say?
Yeah, I think July 4th is a big deal. And make sure you don't judge someone based on their tradition or their politics about July 4th. Just always keep an open mind to all arguments. And I think that wraps it up for today. So thanks for listening. It's been 4th, but have a good week, and we'll get you back on the weekly news on Friday.
Make sure to tune into that. Bye.